Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the SOPP, the Southern Oregon Progressive Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Bell. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys. And I'm here with my co host, the one, the only, the Betsy Cunningham, the brains in the room. Today, we're going to be talking about some big issues that have come up in Douglas County as of late that have even been hitting the mainstream media. So before we hit onto that, we're going to go through our regular introductions. We're joined with one of our guests, Andrew, who we asked on today to talk about what he saw at the county commissioner meeting and things like that. And if you guys want to introduce yourselves, please go ahead.
Sure. So my name's Andrew Rosales. Yeah, I was at the meeting, and in fact, I was so upset by what I saw, I filed a grievance. And we can talk about that, Betsy. I'll lead on your guidance a little bit. I don't think there's any reason why we can't talk about it, but I'm willing to share exactly what I wrote too. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. Who wants to go next?
Okay, yeah, I'm John Hunter with Community Rights, Douglas County, and I've been kind of dealing with the commissioners for 10 years. So what transpired the other day was disappointing, but not surprising. So.
I have to agree with you there, John, honestly.
And like always, I follow John. I'm Zach Whitworth. I'm an historian. I'm a graduate student at the University of Oregon, born and raised in Roseburg. And I'm also affiliated with the Institute for Social Ecology based out of Vermont. Always happy to be here and to provide what analysis I can.
I'll jump in. Dane Zahner, he, him pronouns, and just community member tonight. I was right. It was weird. I opened Facebook for a week away, and what's the first story that pops in is something about our county commissioners, and I was just like going, wow. But so I'm really interested. I love these podcasts. They're great. Kevin and Betsy, you do a great job bringing some really good conversations to the forefront. So thank you for doing these.
We're only as good as our ideas and our guests. So if you have any, please, anybody, shoot them our way. Anybody else want to introduce yourself? My hair was a mess. I had to fix it.
Oh, hi, I'm Lori Price, and I was at the first City of Roseburg council meeting after they had announced that ICE wanted to open a facility here, and was surprised and alarmed about. I had no idea about this Douglas County decision until it was already after the fact. So, thank you for putting attention towards this.
We really appreciate you joining us. I'd ask you, Larry, but usually we don't get an intro from you, so I'm just going to say hi. Thank you for joining us again, Larry. It's a pleasure to have you on with us. So the meeting we're all talking about is the one that happened, what was it, 2-3 days ago now? The Wednesday, the Board of Commissioners held a meeting and passed a resolution in support of what was it termed as, I watched the video, of all police forces, but let's not cut hairs here. If you watched the video, you were very well privy to knowing what Boyce submitted. And, if anybody's interested in looking at, what or when this was submitted and skipping kind of more of the meaty bits, skip to the 34 minutes in, 37 seconds in, and you'll see right where Boyce whips out this resolution talking about all this horrendous support of the current administration and let's kick out the immigrants type of bull stuff. But I wanted to bring up Andrew because one, he had firsthand knowledge of the experience, and he was there on, was there for a couple of reasons. And the first one was, was talking about the county budget, which is already, inflamed as it is. So, I'm just going to kind of hand it over to you and talk about your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically what happened is I have I'll call him a friend that is associated with the Republican Party that still gets some of their literature. And he texted me Tuesday night and said basically, hey, not sure if you know this, but you probably want to go to the commissioners meetings tomorrow because they're planning on doing some tomfoolery around sanctuary cities, right? So didn't press him on it. I just said thank you very much and kind of sent out the word, hey, let's make sure we have a presence at the meeting because supposedly some stuff is going to come up. This is important to note that this was a day before the meeting, right? So we show up to the meeting. Yeah, there was some other stuff going on with some vehicles that I thought was kind of silly, but that's not what we're here for. Skip on. We got to, in fact, if you don't mind, I'll share my screen and I'll just kind of go through the points of fact that I have in my actual complaint, or not complaint. What's the word? Can everybody see this? Should I zoom in?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is the grievance, and
A
I did
little
say,
bit more. Sorry.
how's that?
Everybody okay with that in the audience? Just want to make sure people see it. Yep. All right.
Yes.
Yep, and I'll read through it, so you guys don't have to read, but feel free to read along with me. So this is a grievance regarding the potential violation of Oregon public meeting laws during the July 22nd, 2026 Douglas County Board meeting. I'm submitting this written grievance pursuant with OAR, sorry, dyslexia, 199-050-0070 regarding potential violations of Oregon public meeting law during the county commissioners meetings, blah, 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 blah. So summary of my concern was that during the July 2020 meeting, the Board of Commissioners adopted a resolution concerning Oregon sanctuary laws directing county policy regarding compliance with those laws. The published meeting agenda did not provide any notice that the board would consider deliberate upon or take action regarding such a resolution. The only relevant agenda item was presentation by Citizens Coalition. The agenda did not identify consideration of a resolution, discussion of a sanctuary law, actions concerning state sanctuary laws, direction to county employees regarding compliance of state sanctuary laws, or any other related policy action. Despite the lack of agenda notice, the board instituted and adopted a resolution during this meeting. The public was not provided an opportunity to comment on the resolution after it was introduced and before the vote. I believe these circumstances raise concerns regarding whether the board complied with Oregon public meeting law requirements for adopting notice and meaningful public participation. Statement of facts. This is where it gets a little damning. Because I went back and watched the video and just pulled out the relevant facts that I saw. Of course, they'll have competing relevant facts, blah, blah, blah. But this is what I saw that is very relevant, and we'll just go through it real fast. Feel free to interrupt me if you have questions. So the first thing is that the board published agenda on the 22nd was for a presentation by Citizens Coalition. No agenda item indicated the board would consider or adopt a resolution regarding sanctuary laws or any related law enforcement policy. A member of the public reviewing the agenda would not reasonably understand that the board intended to take official action on such significant policy matters. So what actually happened? Citizens Coalition presentation and discussion at approximately 1850 of the meeting recording. The Citizens Coalition presentation begins. Their chair introduces the presenter. The presenter requested Douglas County issue a proclamation supporting law enforcement at all levels. During a subsequent discussion, members of the public raised questions regarding sanctuary policies. So just a little clarification here. The woman got up and she started to speak and she said that she wanted to support law enforcement at all levels, and it's so important that we're law abiding and that we follow the Constitution, da 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 da. So then she got down and I saw the writing on the wall. So I immediately jumped up and went up there and said, hey, I also think that we should definitely definitely support law enforcement. And one of the best things we can do to support law enforcement is follow the state laws, including the state sanctuary policy. So I would like to add to this proclamation that we will follow state sanctuary laws as well as all other state laws. And then that's when things kind of went off the rails, right? So
I can attest because I just watched the video before this meeting, and it went off the rails beforehand when, in my opinion, Abby Malik started up and started railing against cartels and illegal immigrants in the first place, which was their obvious scapegoat.
right.
And my opinion of it is it raises some obvious questions of not only the ethical concerns about the meeting violations, but also if there was some sort of collusion. Because right now, how could it be too perfect for one person to stand up and then one person to whip out a resolution? Because although Tom Kress read the resolution proposed by Abby Melek and the Citizens United, Chris Boyce at 30 or 37 in the meeting whipped out what seemed to be his own, fast drawn up.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, this is something I've been penning around. And so it's what seemed that was what passed by the county charter, the county board, if I'm not mistaken.
Zach,
So-
did you have your hand up?
I did, just to clarify, before Kevin had said anything, I wanted to clarify for the record that the woman in question who's speaking on behalf of this group that called itself Douglas County Citizens Coalition was Abby Malik. And she also specified that this is not a formalized group, which is to
Right.
say you can't look up this group on a web search and find a website. You couldn't find a Facebook page for this group. So this group may not be anything more than this one individual calling himself a group. It's a very
So let's-
typical thing in any level of politics, but especially at municipal and county levels, is having a single individual saying that they're speaking for a group, but having no evidence of that group behind them. No members, nothing formal at all. So this could be just a single individual.
Yeah.
Big picture.
Yeah. Hold on to all of those thoughts as we read through, because you'll see evidence of many of these things. And I think I laid it out pretty clear. So at approximately 22:13, a citizen asked whether we were discussing sanctuary policy. The chair responded that it was not. Asked the person to sit down. However, discussion continued regarding sanctuary policies. At approximately 25:53, a citizen asked the chair to define sanctuary policies, and the chair responded, "That's not really what we're talking about today. That's not what we've been asked to do." When the citizen again requested for definition, the chair responded, "It's not part of the agenda or what we want to talk about." So he's very clearly saying this has nothing to do with sanctuary policies. This has nothing to do with that. That's not what we're here to talk about. At approximately 28:28, a citizen stands up and says, "There's a subtext to this conversation and it's ICE that we're all talking about." The chair responds, "You are, we are not." At approximately 30:39, a citizen stands up and states publicly that they received advance communication from Douglas County Citizens Coalition indicating that actions were going to be taken by the council regarding the City of Roseburg proclamation sanctuary policy. So this person got an email saying that action was going to be taken. It's really interesting, and I think we need to try to get a hold of that email if we can find it, if anybody has access to it. So keep on going. So at approximately 32:30, Commissioner Boyce states, "I have a draft that I've been working out, born out of people contacting me, asking about what is the county's opinion." Commissioner Boyce then introduces the resolution regarding sanctuary laws. At approximately 34:43, Commissioner Boyce begins reading the resolution. The resolution declares a declaration that Douglas County would not be a sanctuary policy or sanctuary county. That was a typo, forgive me. And includes provisions concerning county compliance with sanctuary laws. At 37:27, a member of the public states that the resolution was not listed on the agenda. Somebody identified it before they started. The public comment was not allowed after introduction of the resolution. At approximately 39:28, the chair declined to allow public comment regarding newly introduced resolution. The sheriff got up to address the board in support with the resolution with prepared remarks. He was referring to a sheet of paper as he was giving his remarks. Weird if it wasn't pre-planned. Just saying.
Exactly.
40, go ahead.
I said, no, exactly. That's
Right. At approximately 47:15, I requested an opportunity to provide comment stating that the resolution had not been listed on the agenda and that members of the public should be allowed to comment before the vote. That request was denied. At 28, Commissioner Freeman stated the discussion could continue, but then proceeded directly to a vote. The resolution was approved. So what am I actually claiming, or what are my grievances? My grievance is that there wasn't adequate public notice. The board took an official action on a significant policy matter that was not identified on the published agenda. The agenda notified the public of a presentation by the Citizens Coalition, but did not notify the public that the board would consider adopt resolution concerning sanctuary laws. I request that the board evaluate whether this provides sufficient notice under Oregon Public Meeting Law. Meeting on full opportunity public participation. The resolution was introduced during the meeting and adopted shortly after. Members of the public were not provided an opportunity to comment on the resolution after the introduction and before the board voted. I request that the board evaluate whether this denied public meaningful opportunity to participate in governmental processes. Possible prior deliberation. The resolution appeared to be drafted before the meeting. Commissioner Boyce stated that he'd been working on the draft resolution before introducing it. The resolution was adopted with limited discussion without public comment and with the sheriff having prepared remarks. These circumstances raise question regarding whether deliberation or decision-making occurred outside of the properly noticed public meeting. I do not have direct evidence of unlawful communication. However, I do request that the board also investigate that and make sure that there wasn't anything shared between the commissioners, county officials, or other parties concerning the substance of the resolution before the meeting. Corrective action, basically, I want them to get back with me. Per state law, they have 21 days to respond before it goes to the Ethics Commission. But we're not done because all of this was before I actually got the resolution, because they kept saying over and over again that this is a personal opinion. This is a personal opinion, right? And because we only read it and nobody could review it, there was some stuff that I had to go back and supplement. So I provided the written agreements. At the time my grievance was submitted, I had not yet provided a copy of the resolution adopted by the board despite requesting an immediate following the meeting. I have now received the adopted resolution and respectfully submit this document as a supplement to my original grievance. The attached resolution provides factual information relevant to the concerns raised in my original grievance. Number one, the resolution confirms the board took formal official action. The adopted document is entitled Resolution of Douglas County Board of Commissioners declaring the county's intention not to be a sanctuary jurisdiction. The resolution is a formal legislative act of the Douglas County Board of Commissioners. It contains multiple findings, operative directives, signature blocks, and became effective immediately upon adoption. This confirms the board was not merely receiving a presentation or discussing a ceremonial proclamation. Rather, it adopted an official policy of Douglas County. The agenda did not notify the public of this action. Again, presentation by the Citizens Coalition. The agenda did not notify the public that the board intended to consider or adopt a resolution declaring Douglas County's position regarding sanctuary jurisdictions, establish official county policy considering cooperating with federal immigration authorities, or taken any other formal legislative action on immigration policy. The adopted resolution demonstrates that the governmental action ultimately taken was substantially different from what a reasonable member of the public would have anticipated from the agenda. Number three, the resolution demonstrates the significance of the action. The resolution extends well beyond expressing general support for law enforcement. Among other things, it adopts official findings and policy statements, declares Douglas County's position regarding sanctuary jurisdiction, establishes policies concerning cooperating with federal immigration authorities, directs the use of county resources, personnel consistent with applicable legal requirements, and became effective immediately upon adoption. This provision illustrates the board took significant official action that was not identified and published in the meeting agenda. Access to the resolution. So just so everybody know, as soon as I got back to the office, because I was volunteering in the office that day, I sent off an email. I said, hey, I plan to file a grievance. Hold on to your records and send me a copy of the resolution. Nothing. A few hours later, I sent another resolution or another set of just general questions over saying, hey, I'm formulating my stuff. I need these questions, answers, no answers. So I walked over there. It was probably 2 o'clock, still the same day, and I said, hey, I need a copy of this resolution. And Jennifer said, well, it's not ready yet. Okay, well, they voted on it, so something's ready. I need a copy of the resolution. He said, well, then you're going to have to file a public records request to get it. And then I just confirmed, like, just to be sure, this was nowhere public where anybody could find it. And she goes, no, because I think they were trying to cover up that it was probably circulated amongst that group, right? So, you know, they keep saying, no, it wasn't publicly posted, but they're shooting themselves in the foot a little bit because now they're breaking public meetings laws. Go ahead, Zach. Or it's not my meeting. Go ahead, Kevin. You can run it.
Well,
No, Zach, please, yeah.
So something that I took note of near the end. So this is in the recording around minute 49:10. Tom Kress explicitly says, I read everything in there right as they were rushing the vote.
That's a very good point.
But
Very good.
the resolution text was not in front of him during the meeting. That implies that he could only have read it in advance of the meeting. That is what we call an admission to conspiracy.
Maybe.
Well, and
One of the
this-
things I'm considering, and I'll ask this group if it's relevant or not. And I'm probably going to reach out to the ALCU, American Union of Civil
ACLU, yeah.
ACLU, got it. Is there damages in the fact that we were denied our civil rights to do these three things? Did they deny me my civil rights whenever I was up there, identified that it wasn't on the agenda, identified that it was significant answer, action, and they just pressed on anyways? Was that an active? And then if there was circulated and talked about beforehand, and then they put that proclamation in there as a placeholder, that way they didn't have to deal with liberals coming up there. So it was this whole, I don't want to say it was or wasn't. We have no proof of that. Make sure we clarify. But there's tidbits of trails leading to that. What do you guys think?
I saw Betsy unmute herself, and usually they're my go-to for answers in this legal question.
Well, I certainly think that a unequal access on free speech probably starts from that group getting that forum, right? Of being actually on the agenda. And then them controlling the speech. Because, I want to remind folks, you don't have a right to speak at a public meeting. You do not under Oregon public meetings law. And you don't have a right to speak in most places. If there's an official hearing that needs a hearing, a legal hearing, then you have a right to do that. And there's some strict rules. Everything else kind of falls under probably the First Amendment. That,
Gotcha.
Is it a violation of your free speech rights? Because they can say nobody can speak, but if they let one speak, they can't say, oh, only those people get to speak. And particularly when it's content-based, and this is clearly content-based because they didn't want to discuss ICE. And so to say you can't speak the words ICE when they do allow speaking, I think that is problematic under a free speech, First Amendment rights issue too. And there actually is a specific statute, federal statute that you can sue under. And even though it happened in the contents of Oregon law, it does not preclude a federal lawsuit, which there's a really interesting thing about federal court cases. For one, they have all the paperwork for you to file a civil rights, civil liberties violation on their websites. They tell you what the procedure is, and then they even have a procedure that you can apply to the federal court to appoint you a lawyer. And and they can do that, so it does not happen. It's not a right anywhere else. And frankly, it evolved probably because they were tired of pro se's trying to represent themselves in federal court and figured it was a lot more efficient to start doing it. Doesn't mean you're entitled to one like you are when it's a crime. So
Right.
if you go to the federal court, Eugene Court website, it has a whole section on, pro se litigants within the federal system. And it is, but I would suggest the ACLU, I mentioned that because they were down here regarding ICE specifically in Roseburg, and they were here around the time the city council was here. But this was also part of rural organizing project and some efforts that they, have been involved in around ICE. And I did do outreach and send an invite to Stephanie, but I know she also had mentioned she had some conflict scheduled because we were going to have her on about organizing around elections. They were going to have her on in August, but anyway. So yeah, I mean, I think there is, and I think it would be worthwhile pursue no matter which way. I did see in the Oregonian that this attorney general has said, that um, you know, the county commissioners, don't supersede state law and they'll be watching the county. I think it's a good opportunity to emphasize some things, about the flaws in our current system, particularly since we have this you know, um, three division of county commissioners that are not just the legislators, they're also the administrators. And I think this is one of the crux of why this particular thing happened. And so I'm going to give an opening to Kevin to make a statement now.
Well, and I mean, it just, it goes to speak of that. I know we've been talking about the county charter on our program a lot, and this is one of the reasons when we talked about, me and Betsy were talking about this program leading up to this, one of the things we wanted to lead into, because, this is the egregious abuse that we can see when legislatures become administrators. You know what I mean? Because although they claimed that they were not directing the Douglas County sheriffs to do anything, they were not doing this, but as seen by Andrew, they clearly were. You know what I mean? And it just shows the egregious abuse of our system as a whole, especially in our three county commissioners and that whole system of government we've got right now in Roseburg. And it goes to speak to the point that, the document me and Betsy have been whipping up includes 5 county commissioners and an actual county administrator, because we saw that in regards to Lane County, they've got extreme things, but right now they're not arguing about ICE. They're arguing about some crazy Republican who's standing up and trying to give sermons during county commissioner meetings, and they're sick of it. And so, as much as they're stuck in the business of fighting about preaching and legislating, there's still the administrative function that it's going on that's clear, that is sound, that, there is probably, I'm not going to say that it's a model system that we need to all base our, you know what I mean, but at least that the wheels are still turning without, say, freaking this being all caught up by a 3-month war over should we pass a ICE resolution or should we do this, at least we know people are still getting fed, the unions are getting talked to and everything like that. I mean, I do want to talk about how this could maybe be stemmed off by a county charter in a second or two. I think it's a little bit also more important to go back to the meeting itself, because, right now we're all crying about it because it's effectively an ICE proclamation in response to Roseburg City Council's support for sanctuary state laws. As much as we watched the video and they were wishy-washy with their words, oh, this isn't that, this isn't that, this isn't that.
Right.
When you expressly look at it and you listen to what Chris Boyce says in his first 2 sentences about enforcing federal immigration laws and things like that, it's cut and dry exactly what it is. Zach, your hand was up, buddy. Did I cut you off?
You didn't cut me off. I was just waiting for you to be done. Uh, so it's more cut and dry than even that. So in the resolution itself, which Boyce read in the meeting, he of course prefaced this by saying that the board is charged with representing the citizens of Douglas County. We can get into a whole discussion about what that exactly means, but I can quote from his reading of this resolution. He says, whereas Douglas County opposes any Oregon state law that contradicts the current administration and federal law, and so on. Something curious happens there. This is not simply an opposition to any Oregon state law that contradicts federal law. That, of course, would be unconstitutional by federal law. But he specifically says, and this is in the resolution that they passed, opposition to Oregon state law that contradicts the current administration and federal law. What does that tell you?
Well, and
Any
it's
guesses?
even more telling that, when Sheriff Hanlon stood up to the podium to give his 2 cents on the whole thing, I've got a quote here too that I wrote down that, if they followed a lot of the state laws, a lot of people in the county would be harmed. So it begs the question of how many laws is the county choosing to enforce? What are they cherry picking?
No. So current administration is the Trump administration in the White House.
Yes.
This is to
Right.
say that Douglas County in this resolution that the board has just unanimously moved forward with. Says Douglas County opposes any Oregon state law that contradicts the current administration. So if Oregon state law is deemed to be out of step with the current administration, not the federal government. The federal government is not the same as the current administration. Administrations can change, but the federal government can still exist in continuity. The current administration is in reference to sitting president and cabinet.
Well, and you've got a great point because, like when we had, say, the 4 years of Biden, how many of actual federal policies did they cherry pick in that scenario too? Of that administration and can turn to this one.
It's not simple cherry picking. This resolution is a swearing of allegiance to that current administration. Specifically, not to the federal government, not to the US Constitution, but to the Trump administration. Specifically.
That's an excellent catch, Zach, really I think you're absolutely right, because I heard that too. That piqued my interest.
So what that means for us is the statement is a statement. The resolution is a statement of allegiance. It is opposed to allegiance to the state of Oregon, insofar as the state of Oregon is out of step, in contradiction with, in conflict with the Trump administration. It is a swearing of allegiance not to Oregon, but to the Trump administration. That's to say, this resolution is a disavowal of being an Oregonian.
Or their oath of office, right? It's actually contrary to the oath of office that gives them legitimacy in their position. So, yeah.
Well, it's yes and no. They are appealing to a higher power in this case. The assertion is that the state of Oregon has nullified its own authority, and the authority of the commissioners of Douglas County is not rooted in the sovereignty of the state of Oregon over this jurisdiction that divvies powers out to the counties, but to not the federal government, but the Trump administration. This is like it's a vassalization, to put it one way. The reformulation of Douglas County as specifically a vassal of, again, not the federal government, but the Trump administration.
My assessment is the way I read this, and I didn't read it until after I heard him. I didn't read it until after I listened voice read it. is that if it's a lawyer involved document, it's a very unskilled lawyer of trying to avoid saying the word ICE and actually probably digging themselves a deeper hole in this resolution to try to pretend it's not about ICE has probably made what they say even worse than if it were ICE. So it's a poorly worded document, and it's the kind of language used to try to avoid saying something clearly that you can't come up with the words to say.
It's obvious, skirting around the actual answer. It's politicians through and through, oh, we're going to talk about ICE without actually talking about it. We're going to talk about immigration enforcement by blaming everything on illegal immigrant drug cartels. You know what I mean? They're all going to put this on the foot of, radical conspiracies, frankly. And not, I mean, like, I'll be completely frank here. Like, if anybody's not aware, my mom was busted about 2 months ago for moving a large quantity of smack. I mean, she's not. I know my parents are in tune with the criminal underworld of Douglas County, and that's why I'm not as close to them as I might want to be. But with saying that, I'm not worried about the freaking cartel right now. I'm more worried about the brother Speed, dude. I'm more worried about, anything other than illegal immigrants. There's actual problems here in Douglas County that are in turn through, actual criminal organizations, but I'm not seeing them through quote unquote illegal immigrant drug cartels where they're out, Chris Boyce is claiming to be out there claiming, mowing down 100-acre weed farms and shit like that. No, this is, what we really see right now is a lot of grandstanding and blaming the brown person. You know what I mean? What we're good at. You know what I mean? And it's a travesty, really. And, this also, like I said before, I wanted to segue into the solutions to this. And, one of the very few things that I see right now, because we've been seeing how elections go through us since my aunt was running in 2018, about those times, is that it needs to be a formal restructure of Douglas County's government. I mean, right now we're underneath what we call the state charter and stuff like that, but we need our own principal governing body to actually weed out this crazy conspiratorial problems. And I mean, I'm not going to say that these places with county charters don't have their own problems. But again, with my emphasis on a county manager and administrator, is that at least when these sorts of kerfuffles come up, that the union negotiations are still going on. The people are still getting fed. The insurance rates are still being adjusted. Things that are not the great big, thing that we would think is legislation would actually go down to the administration. Anybody else have anything on that? Because I mean, I have a lot to say on, a county charter, but I think right now that we're looking for the solution to, we see that what the resolution passed at the county level, and there's no quick way to say, okay, here's what's our solution to this. It's lawyers, it's running people, it's a change in the system of government. No, those are our three options, in my opinion. And right now, I'm kind of vowing for the change of government. There, it's legal policy. I mean, how many counties in Oregon are home rule county charters? It happens all over the state.
Was it nine? I've lost the number. Zach, did you want to say something?
Yes, yeah. Wanted to return to Betsy. You'd made a comment about poor language in this. And want to join that with something that Dane's just dropped in the chat here. I hope you don't mind if I read your chat comment, Dane. So
Not at all.
Dane's written in our chat here, they must hate all the publicity so far. It brings attention to something they probably do not want attention drawn to. I have to push back on that because resolutions like these are not simply poorly written or not or trying to avoid certain attention. These kinds of resolutions are intended to draw attention. They're intended to incite coverage by the press, specifically to attract federal prosecutors and outside capital for lawsuits against the state of Oregon. That's to further drain state resources, for one thing. And that's much in the same way that, say, Todd Vaughn, Ben Edel, Sam Frost, Steve Michaela Hammerson have worked their way in lawsuits in Douglas County. They're, pressing for lawsuits on the matter of fraudulent elections. That is a attack on the budget of a county too. So at the same time, it's a call to the feds to launch a focused attack on the state of Oregon, both legally and considering ICE or DHS militarily. That's to say, it's an attempt to whatever degree to invite a flood of federal agents into this region. The long-term aim of that, as I said, is to transform Douglas County into a vassal, to do away with that mediating force that we call the state of Oregon. That's a wedge between the county and the federal government, or in their case, the Trump administration. And it's also meant to encourage other counties to follow suit.
Well, and it's also very important to emphasize that, this is a dog whistle for the local conservatives, because we can't regard the fact that this is the first time Chris Boyce has been turned into a runoff in over 2 decades. This is the dog whistle to seem more conservative than Steve Hammersman, because Steve Hammersman is, you're right, and I completely agree that this is a proclamation meant to be, attention grabbing and, eyes on me, because, this election is happening.
Yeah. Before you jump in, John, let me just I want to finish one thought here. Something we've talked about a while ago on the program was with regard to what, say, the blue states on the American West Coast should be doing with regard to the actions of the Trump administration, the expansion and use of ICE domestically to specifically attack the so-called blue states. There's been wide talk about, say, soft secession on that these various blue states should do. There should be blue state coalitions, and they should softly, work internally to distinguish themselves from the feds, and to create relative safe havens. That I mentioned a while ago on the program can also be done by lower levels, like at the county level or municipal levels, against the state of Oregon, just as any county in California can do the same to the state of California. In that regard, I think what we're seeing is a form, a development of a soft secession from the state of Oregon on the county level, and to the degree that it is meant to incite other counties to do that, sooner or later. What I think we're looking at is an attempt to balkanize the state of Oregon. It's a weird thing. It's a weird assertion to make, but this is part of a much bigger
No,
picture.
it's an issue that I had, I think, a long time ago with community rights at the national level, that community rights, they seem to be surprised that community rights was a dog whistle in the 1990s here by the anti-environmental movement, the timber industry. Local control. Because I said, when you say local control, that has its problems. So it is a very interesting point you made. But Lori said in the chat that I think that they made their point by adopting a resolution without legal process. So, that kind of, goes into what you were saying, that this idea that, that they're going to do what they want, and so they're going to draw that proverbial line in the sand. John.
Yeah, couple things. I saw a comment on Facebook the other day. I don't know if it's true. If you guys know anything, that ICE has already selected an office space here Has anybody heard anything about that?
I might have read the same thing as you, but I don't know anything.
Okay, well, the source is debatable. I agree with Zach that is attention grabbing. It seems to me this things that the commissioners have done in the past. One of the things that I can cite is what that last fall, Andrew was at the meeting when they continued to move forward on their R20 rural lands thing, which goes against state laws. They want to change state laws so they can get more rich people buying land in the country. They like to do this kind of stuff. I think that they like to be seen as a test case for the extreme right wing in the state, wondering how much they can push and how much they can get away with. And it seems like Douglas County is the county that they really feel that they can use, that they can push these buttons. Yeah. After that resolution that at the meeting, I couldn't help but reflecting kind of what Zach was saying. What's going to stop them someday from having a meeting and passing a resolution that we're no longer part of the state of Oregon and they're going to join Idaho? I mean, it's pretty crazy. But
So you're making the argument, John, that Todd Vaughn and Dan Loomis are really behind the scenes buddies, that they're all colluding together, that there really isn't this split in the Republican Party. It's just a ruse to make us happy and unaware and unprepared.
well, it seems to me that the stuff that they want to push is really a pretty right wing agenda, and maybe they're doing this right now because of the election, and it makes boys look, even more extreme over on the Hammerson side. Yeah,
I think that certainly is the battle he has. Andrew, I'm sorry, John, are you done?
I
done.
would later on at the end when we get done. I got a few reflections about the whole county and their meetings that I would like to bring up, if anybody wants to hear it. So anyway.
All right, Andrew.
So here's my theory of what happened. I think you guys are giving them way too much credit. Maybe there's someone behind the scenes goading them into doing things. But I think the city, because I just don't think they're that intelligent, to be completely honest. I think the city passed a resolution and people were pissed. People on the right were pissed, calling them, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And then they were like, well, what are we going to do? We don't want to put it on the agenda, because if we put it on the agenda, then everybody's going to show up and make it this whole big thing. And they don't want to deal with that bullshit because they're lazy. It's not that they're, these masterminds, they're just lazy. So then they come up with this scheme. This is my theory, again, just in case it does ever go to court. I don't know, and I don't have proof of this. But, I think they conspired with that group, emailed it amongst themselves, shared it, said, yeah, this is great. Let's all go. We'll have this presentation where we can stand up and say, yeah, let's pass a resolution. And then Chris Boyce will be the hero that happens to have a resolution ready. And then they pass it, and yay. But so it got out, and then we showed up, and now they're swimming around in their bullshit trying to figure out what to do next. Now, may it go the way Zach said? I could definitely see it going that way. But if it does, I think it's just pure happenstance, not some mastermind on their part.
Well, you didn't grow up in the cartoon era that I did. It's usually that clumsy buffoon that thinks they're the mastermind that gets their comeuppance at the end. So I'm going by all of the 60s cartoon characters and Justice in America. Zach, did you want to say something?
It doesn't take a mastermind. What my point is that they are making an appeal to the Trump administration with this. That's the point of this. You don't need to be a brainiac to pull a move like this. All you need are friends in high places, and they all happen to be in high places.
Yeah, fair
Um,
enough.
it's also important to understand that, say, Trump himself is not a mastermind,
Right.
and there is a long history of of emperors, of leaders of coups d'état, of dictators who are also not masterminds.
Yeah,
They just have shared uh what's the word? Shared interest with those around them in powerful positions. Their strength is not in their intellect, it is in the force that they have behind them at their disposal.
yeah.
That's all it takes. This is a brute's game.
I think they're a little reactionary, is how I would say, because I think just the passing of the Roseburg resolution to the time that it took them to pass this one was too much of a coincidence. And in speaking of that, I mean, it only took like what, not even a week from the Roseburg resolution to this one. I mean, of course, they're going to have a sloppy, ill-fitted resolution without any true vents, actual venting it. And I think it's really important that, now we see the problem. We've seen this problem since before the Three Stooges. We saw this when, Doug Roberts was the longest serving county commissioner in Oregon history. The game hasn't changed since the 80s in Douglas County. You know what I mean? We're talking about the same players for different players for the same game. And that's, again, why I bring up, the county charter the ways that I do, because, when we're talking about running elections and doing all these things, we're obviously on an offset of people who are obviously a little bit more, I would say, fascist, but conservative bend. You know what I mean? Because they're a little bit more authoritarian than us. So how do we? What is the problem? What's the promise that we can make the public for a better tomorrow? And I think that's one of the things that I always bring up with a county charter, because one of the things that we also talk about in regards to the county charter, me and Betsy have penned up, is citizens assemblies. So if there is something big or county ranging, something like that, that there could be a lot. There's a formal process in place for people to get their opinions across, and that has to be recognized by our county government, because that's the problem right now, is that we are arguing about transparency meeting laws is because they don't have any. Frankly, they're arguing about nothing right now. And it's the same reason we don't have county finance reform here locally. I mean, we passed that kind of thing here with a 68% margin, but then they just went to the courts and said, hey, you guys don't have a county charter, it can't be implemented actually. So that's your guys' fault. Come back to us when you have one. And that's how we're at right now. John, your hand's up.
Yeah, well, you were saying with the charter, there would be processes in place. There are processes in place right now, and they are ignoring them. So it's not necessarily getting other types of processes. It's the entire system that is wrong.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Just because you have a home rule charter and there's certain process, that doesn't mean that they're going to pay any attention to them. They're going to get around them whenever they feel like it.
Right.
In much the same way, too, I was thinking this in watching the recording of the meeting. The cries for public comment really show a lack of understanding of the circumstances, of the political conditions. It's like it's similar to a character in a movie who's been kidnapped, screaming, "Let me go! Let me go!" Is the kidnapper going to let them go? No. That's You need to have uh, forms of political force behind such a statement for it to have any kind of weight. And that also means that, public comment is also itself not enough. Because even if, okay, this applies, of course, to places where public comment is the norm, as in the Roseburg City Council, you could go up there and speak your piece for however long they give you. It doesn't actually matter to the city council in any concrete sense. One might make an argument, yes, you could try to convince somebody, but at the end of the day, it doesn't have weight behind it because a city council, a commission of any kind can flatly ignore that, and there's not much that those public commenters can do about it in the current system of so-called politics.
That's absolutely true, but I think often it is a vehicle where there's a public record. I got to tell you, that's why I started showing up decades ago. I learned decades ago that they don't give a shit about smart. They don't give a shit about facts. So you're absolutely right. You don't have the numbers. The best you're going to do is, get a public record out of there. At least, that may have some use. And luckily in this situation, there's some legal recourse above them, right? That not only is, the Secretary of State, the Ethics Commission, um, it may be a campaign finance violation. I mean, a campaign violation if the reason was to bolster Boyce's chances, to make him look like the most MAGA in the room, that's going to be in the room. And there's also another thing we haven't discussed right now that as I started to look at this, I remembered, hey, sheriffs have to be licensed by the state of Oregon. And there are certain things that they have to do in order to maintain that. And there's things they can't do, which is violate state law, which they can't do in order to maintain it. It doesn't mean a claim that I'm even not going to, pass. I'm not going to enforce the law doesn't really qualify because that's free speech, and it's kind of hinges on that kind of right even for an elected official. But it does, if he does anything about it, or then that is a violation of state law. And they're not only could his license, but theoretically any deputy sheriffs in the county, any licensed deputy sheriff, because all of them have to be licensed as well, could theoretically have their license under scrutiny if they were involved in a stop, and then all they'd have to do is ask somebody, are you here legally? That is the question you're not allowed to ask if you're an employee under Oregon state law in law enforcement of any kind. So, just that question, because of the person's surname or whatever reason motivated, doesn't even matter. You could be white and they wouldn't question it, but if they even asked you, that's a violation of what the sanctuary law is. Yeah, Andrew.
Well, I'm just wanted to add, it's also just infuriating to me that they just blatantly lied to the crowd because they kept saying, well, this is just our personal opinion. No, it's the moment you vote on it, that is the county's opinion. That's a
Right.
county resolution. And they're like, well, this is just our opinion. This isn't really anything. No bullshit. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I don't think anything can be done about that, but just blatantly lie. The irony of breaking laws to pass a resolution in support of law enforcement is not lost upon me either. Just stupid.
Yeah, we should have a slogan. Think of a slogan. You're breaking the law to support the law?
Yeah.
What the hell is wrong with you?
We have to understand what they mean by law then. When they are saying we're upholding the rule of law, that's our goal, that doesn't have any meaning but submission to the state. I don't mean the state of Oregon, but to the state, the political entity called the state. That's, the US, the United States is the state in this case. That's the argument. And it reminded me too of a struggle that was articulated actually by Hesiod thousands of years ago. Many people are watching the Odyssey and getting their fill of Homer. Hesiod is really interesting. Ancient Greek poet, among other things. There's a famous work called Works and Days. And much of it is railing against the rule of the barons against the common people, what we would today call arbitrary law. The law was understood by Hesiod in that context to have been created by a ruling class effectively. And it was not objective in any sense. It was formulated specifically to protect the interests of those rulers against the common people. That struggle has not died. That is still what is up, we're up against when they are appealing to the rule of law. Their understanding of law is subjective. Law is what, whatever we want effectively. And in present circumstances, who are we to challenge that when that is backed up by the sheriff standing in the room? The only thing that stands, well, two things. The main thing that stands in the way between those three county commissioners and frustrated people in the room is the guy with the gun who keeps everybody in line either by pulling it out or in most cases presiding as a form of soft terror in the room to assert the authority of those three schmucks up there. That's about it. Otherwise, of course, there's the like customs of, well, we respect the law and we're not going to do anything to you, arguably also conditioned by those very circumstances of terror in the long term. But that's what they mean here. It's not law and order. It is arbitrary law that they are working to uphold.
Well, and then you look at a lot of argument in places I get myself ensconced in lately, on Facebook, is this argument over and over again of the supremacy clause. So trying to argue that Oregon has no legal authority to have the sanctuary law to begin with. So because that they have but they don't even understand what the issue is when they start in that argument, because it's not relevant to the supremacy clause at all. We're not saying they can't enforce immigration. And we've had discussions about this specifically, that the sanctuary promise, I could really go back and slap the people in the 1987 legislature for calling the damn thing sanctuary, because it's no common meaning of sanctuary. And this really is part of the reason people are so riled up, because they view sanctuary as we're going to protect you and stop those other bad guys from getting you. And that's not what it does at all. It actually makes it just very clear that state and local, including city and county resources, are not going to be used to help ICE do its job, because they were expecting us to carry the financial burden. This is why 1987, it passed with only one opposition in the state legislature. So the reality is all these people are crazy or stupid. I don't know what it is, but I need to quit going on Facebook. That's for sure. Let me see. Anybody else have any questions? And Lori said, I applaud the grievance. I think making the grievance public will help bring attention to the wrongdoing. I think bringing attention to it is great. And I do applaud you, Andrew, for rallying the troops and trying to get people out there and paying attention to this. Because when I looked at the agenda, and unfortunately I do look at the county agenda, I look at it and I'm thinking, who in the hell are these people? What in the hell is this group? There's no mention, because usually even when a group comes, they would say, like, for a proclamation for the farmers market, we got one 5 years ago, right? At the senior center when we were doing a farmers market. That's that might be on the agenda, but there was no way to, like you mentioned in your grievance. So I think it's important for people to know that and know the content even of your grievance. And I'm gonna share right now. This is a link where the video starts at the county commission meeting. It's on their YouTube channel. It's a 20-second meeting. And I'm also in a second going to post another link, which is actually from the June 10th meeting. And it's important for you to watch that. And it's at the comments, the county commissioner comments, because it's Tim Freeman. And this was right. This was, in relation to he's the one that brings it up. It's not Boyce who brings it up. So when you think about the time frame in between, how much time they actually had to orchestrate this, we're talking about, I think it was, like I said, I think it's June 10th. So they're talking about well over a month, to put stuff in play to do that. You can see that. And I also put a link for the proclamation, even though the resolution up there too.
I just want to say one thing about sanctuary laws. It's important to remember that part of the reason why they're in place is for whenever crimes are committed against immigrants, they can go report those. So if you're concerned about little girls being raped or, grandmothers being robbed, if they're illegal immigrants or undocumented workers, whatever you want to call them, right now they can't go to the police and ask for help out of fear of being deported or worse. So, there is a human side to this and making sure that law and order is in place by allowing them to report crimes committed against them without fear of retribution.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Andrew, because I used to do tenant organizing in barrios in Long Beach, California. I actually worked as a paralegal for a while for a Centro de la Raza down there. And that was a legal service program, our main service with volunteer lawyers. And they came there just for that, but they wouldn't even go to legal aid, which they could have gone to for free because we had a fund of money that we served people. We didn't check immigration status, we didn't ask that shit. And people were really afraid. So they're then taking advantage of not just of the traditional crime, but slumlords, right? They're victimized everywhere because of, and the harder we make that for them, the more they're going to be victimized. So we're facilitating crimes against people who did nothing worse than really trying to make a better life for their own families.
And before I let Zach go, Dane has actually had a has a question in the comments for quite a while. How do we get the state to hold them accountable? As we've seen with the administration, nothing seems to change the outcomes, nor do they follow the consequences when the courts say they can't do it. He steps Congress. What's the recourse is what I'm seeing Dane asking here. Besides just, the complaints and stuff like that. Do we just see how it goes?
No,
Answer your-
that's exactly what I'm asking. Is I mean, I feel kind of hopeless. Like, we've seen an administration that gets away with everything they do, and nothing stops him. Nothing. And you can say he gets stopped, but he just does another thing. And what's going to stop this? What are the consequences? I mean, Zach has given me no hope whatsoever. I just feel I'm not dinging you, Zach, at all on that. I love your honesty, but I just feel kind of hopeless.
Andrew, you're muted if you want to.
Well, maybe I should respond to that. But I at first had my hand up because I wanted to remind Betsy to make a note to put the link to the meeting recording in the description of the video on YouTube when it's
Oh,
posted.
yeah.
Just keep that in mind. To respond to Dane, I actually had this conversation earlier today with another group. It's describing what's going on does sadly have the typical effect of sparking a kind of hopelessness. But it's important to also understand that there's another side to all this. I could say this especially from I study the end of the Russian Empire in particular. This last year I've been studying that most closely. And this can also be said of many another regime like that one. The latter years of many an empire or dictatorship, whatever, totalitarian type states, autocracies, the latter years of them are often marked by intense periods of not just unrest on the part of the public, the masses of people in any one part of the world, but also by, and usually preceded by, intensification of crackdowns on increasing numbers of people within those states. So, for example, I could use the Russian Empire as my best example because I know it best. In the 1870s, there were revolutionaries in the Russian Empire. This is long before your Bolsheviks and such, who were um, fairly convinced that the approach to take to a social revolution was nonviolent. It was not assassinations. It was not mass mob violence. It was largely forming study groups, reading circles, and writing and sharing around reading material, telling people about, social conditions, being educators was the idea. Um, like the major circle of this was called the Tchaikovsky Circle, Nikolai Tchaikovsky, who was actually a friend of Paul Kaplan of New Odessa, which was here in Douglas County, which I am still studying very closely. And in this period, uh, even those who were organizing reading groups and were reading, relatively harmless literature, they were not posing an immediate active threat to the state, were hunted down, arrested, and shipped off to Siberia. It didn't take very much, but the general understanding that came out of this was that the the state and its officials understand that they're very weak, that they're like a bullet or a gun without a bullet. They This period was is understood retrospectively as um, being one in which the state and its functionaries were not really under that much immense threat. Like the masses of the public had not really turned against the state or the czar. Most of the population loved the czar, the emperor, the king. There was not an imminent revolution happening. But the regime was terrified that one would happen, and they cracked down hard. And over the decades, that intensification of crackdowns did actually lead to revolution, to the masses of the Russian public turning against the regime. The thing that I have to stress is, that's a faraway case that we have a distant connection to, of course. Um, But that's the case in the United States. It's the case in England and France and many other parts of the world. In There are many cases in which regimes face no serious concrete opposition, and they crack down on anyone super hard because they know that they're delicate things. A regime can be taken down overnight. And it also goes to show that the people that we are dealing with, whether they're county commissioners or the Trump regime, um, they're not just fragile and they understand that they're fragile. They're highly paranoid as well. Like think about the rhetoric, especially in the last week, put out by the Trump administration regime about communists and anti-capitalists and anti-fascists, as though there's like some kind of communist revolution that's happening in the United States. Where is it?
I wish.
Where is it? They think that like Zoran Mamdani, the mayor of New York, is a scary communist and he's been put on this list. He's not. He is far from that. And that's just a single city. So
There's a whole people on that, a whole bunch of people on that list. I mean, there's groups. DSA is on, now these, anti-terrorist, list that came out more recently out of the federal
yeah. So
administration.
whether they openly admitted it or not, and they're not going to admit it, but we can see it in the kind of rhetoric and the moves that they're making at any level. They're terrified of groups like this. No matter how educated or no matter how radical or not we all of us are in one room saying we don't like this. That's enough to scare the pants off of these people. That is worth having some hope for. They know that they're fragile. They know that their regime, whether it's the regime that we call the county commission in Douglas County or the Trump regime in the White House, they know that there's just a thin blue line between them and everybody else who could demolish them overnight, one way or another. That has happened historically. So I would say there's plenty to be hopeful about. They are on the run from not that much.
I think that Dane is probably like me. He wants them to be, wants them to lay down and roll over. I'm tired of chasing them.
They're
John,
not going to do that. Yeah.
John,
Yeah, just kind of follow up a little bit what Zach said, getting back to Zane. Well, we don't want to go away. We want to keep. We want to keep. We want to. We want to keep on, pestering them. And I look at 5 years ago going to the county meetings, and I look at now. I look what happened the other day. I don't have, it's there's a younger group now. Andrew and these other people are aware now, and they're going to these meetings and they're creating awareness, and that's important. I think just the little things too, like the workshops that the community workshops that the four candidates had this year for the primaries. It didn't produce the results we wanted, but I even told Lori Wicks, I said that's never happened before. This is a good start. I mean, so there are some things going on that I find encouraging and really a positive. And we got to keep pestering these guys. They don't like it, and I kind of takes joy in the fact that it irritates them. So, and there's one other thing. I don't know. Maybe you don't want to hear this. It's kind of a grind of mine. I messed a little bit on Facebook. I watch it on YouTube, and when it first started, the woman was up there giving this presentation about the resolution for caregivers. There's an elderly guy, a couple rows in back of her, and she's talking, and he's got his hands cupped to his ear, trying to hear what she says. And I go, I understand that. And then they start the discussion about, this resolution and that. A guy gets up there, and I don't know who he is because they don't allow people asking questions to be seen on the video. And he says, where are we at here? I can't hear anything. And then later on, I don't know whether it's the same guy got up there and said he's having problems hearing. Well, this Tim Freeman said, well, we've had a lot of meetings here, and this is the first time anybody's raised this question. Well, it really pissed me off because, first of all, somebody right before him had said, I'm having problems hearing. And it really pissed me off because it was a blatant lie. And I don't mind Tim Freeman here. I hope he hears it. It was a blatant lie because I've said it to him before at meetings. And his response was to look at the people in the room, which were mostly county employees, and said, anybody else having problems hearing? And they all shook their head, no, ignore me, and went on. And I've been in there with Jim DeLapp. I don't know if you know him, but he has really quality hearing aids. I'd come out of those meetings, I say, Jim, did you hear anything? He said, I can't hear a damn thing. He even mentioned it once, and they ignored him. Last spring, when they had that hearing for the R20, the woman sitting in front of me from the Friends of Douglas County that was fighting this, she's sitting in the front row. She's like 2 or 3 seats away from the guy, a talking head of the planning department, and she says, I can't hear anything. They go through this whole thing like they turn up the volume on the microphones. It didn't help me. I don't think it helped her. This is an ongoing issue. I watched. So one of the reasons I don't go very often is I don't hear much what is going on. And that's why I watch the videos. Well, still, their whole sound system is, even watching it on YouTube, you can't always hear everything. Like the guests, the people getting up there, commenting. Most of them aren't professional speakers, so they don't always use the microphone right. Also, they have no closed captioning available on the YouTube. We have closed captioning available tonight. I'm using it. So this is one of my biggest grinds. Of all the stuff that went on at that meeting, probably the thing that pissed me off the most was when Tim Freeman said, well, we've had meetings here before and nobody's ever said they had this kind of problem. It happens all the time. They do not give a damn. And maybe they can say, well, we don't have the kind of money. I would like to point out that since I started complaining about this, other people, the commissioners have continued to give themselves pay raises. A few years ago, they each gave themselves a pay raise of $10,000 each. You add payroll costs to that, it comes to about $40,000. Certainly, upgrading a sound system in that wouldn't cost anywhere near $30,000.
Well,
And
Lori points out in the chat that ADA violation or American with Disabilities Act or the Oregon Disabilities Rights Law, and that's absolutely correct. They have to be accessible for people who have issues with hearing, whether it's total deafness or even, partial inability to hear. And they should have equipment. And I'm trying to think, it was the Douglas County Commissioners when Susan Morgan was there, they used to even have a little amplified device that they would give people with headphones, right? They would allow them, to pick up. I don't know what happened to that technology. It's probably outdated, but that's a valid issue. I think that it's a good issue to raise, and people should make complaints to BOLI, if not, the feds regarding the access issue, because I want to, 1990 was when the American with Disabilities Act took effect. Okay, 1990. In 1973, it was a federal law that under the Vocational Rehabilitation Act, that anything that was made with federal money, had to be accessible to people with disabilities. So in my mind, there is like zero excuse for that people not being able to hear in that room, no matter what the cost is. And cost is not always a prohibition as to a demand to fix the problem. Lots and lots of places try to say, oh, that costs too much. Well, guess again.
Yeah, I would like to point out too, of course, this is all theoretical, it's theory, but the courthouse and that meeting room is supposed to be the people's place. And
Yes.
it's where the commissioners get paid to do business to do the people's business. And every person in that room should have the ability to hear, and even people watching on YouTube should be able to hear and understand what they are saying. And if you can send me anything you got on this, Betsy, I would appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah,
But
no problem. Yeah.
but I know how, I know how Dane feels too. So
Well, and then the closed captioning, you're saying when you can't click on closed, they're on YouTube, right? So you're
yeah,
saying that they don't have that checked on their YouTube channel? They don't, so, or they don't do the transcriptions?
it you can the closed captioning was not available.
Really?
And
it might be what they use for recording. Because when I started going to city council meetings last year, I asked, can't think of her name right now, but she was covering for them. And when they did the Zooms, I was like, can you turn closed captioning on? Because then she did it and I could understand. I was just reading the screen, and it was just a nice way to have closed. So if they used a Zoom option or any one of the formats, they could have closed captioning on the screen to overcome that. So I just use my phone, but most phones, iPhone has transcribe on it now. And I just turn my transcribe on and kind of follow. And city council meetings are usually pretty easy because one person's speaking at a time. When there's multiple people, the transcribe can get a little bit washy. But but I bet you it's the format they're using, John, is that it doesn't have closed captions when they're recording it. So when they're posting it, there's no closed captions even available.
Then that's the fix. I mean, that's one easy fix for them, at least on the closed caption. So, but then there's issues. There's people like Glenn. Having closed caption would not help my husband, and he falls asleep in city council meetings because he can't hear. I said,
he's
okay,
a
well, it's
lucky
time to
guy.
leave.
There
But he
are other
wants to
reasons to fall
go,
asleep.
but yeah, but he wants to go, but once he can no longer hear, it's hard to pay attention in that room. So there's no excuse. I mean, to me, on either level, that people can't hear, people don't have access to the information they need to participate on an equal footing as every other city, person has a right to do. So
I just wanted to say one other thing about it too is, they, on YouTube, when you see it on YouTube and they're recording it, like I said, every time the commissioner talks, the cameras are on them. When somebody's speaking up at the podium, the only time they show the camera is when they're doing a presentation, which are usually the department heads. Anybody from the audience doing comments, they don't allow them to be seen. It was quite ironic, though. I mean, then this woman from the Citizen Coalition gets up there to give her presentation, and guess what? They show her because she's giving a presentation. Soon as it's over and they allow comments, they don't. Andrew, Melissa, MA, I don't know who else, all spoke. They aren't seen. It's pretty devastating in a way to realize the opposition here doesn't even get a chance to be seen. And they have said that they don't do this because, well, they did it a while when Gary Leaf was chair. He allowed the cameras on. And it kind of cracks me up because they say they don't do it because they don't want citizens grandstanding before the camera. Anybody that saw that meeting yesterday or, on Wednesday came to the realization that the big grandstanders are the commissioners.
It was bad performance art. Zach.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah. So
also-
this is a grind of mine. It's been going on for a long time, but it's,
we have
thank you for letting me say it.
We do have to remember too that as much as Boyce and the others will say that they're working on behalf of their constituents and all this, they do not represent you, me, and most of the rest of us. They don't work for us. They only work for us insofar as they are forced to.
That's true.
And so when we're saying things like we're going to file a complaint with the state of Oregon to deal with this, we're appealing to the force of the state of Oregon. We can also appeal to other forces locally, like masses of people who live here in our community, to popular assemblies, to other local political organizations, bases of people who live here just as well. That is also a basis of force, whether or not it's in league with the state of Oregon's power of force as well. I think we should move away from that, but for the time being, those are our conditions. But I gotta keep the pin put in that point. They do not represent us. They do not work for us. They will only work for our benefit insofar as we force them to. Otherwise, it is their interests that are being served. Political scientists have known this about municipal and county governments for well over a century. That is how these kinds of politics, so-called, function. And
Because they don't work for residents, they work for the capitalists. I mean, this is when you see this whole mentality of, oh, the business people, we consult with the business people. We want business people on these boards and commission because they can inform city government. They don't give a shit whether they live here or not, right? It's not and residents, that is one of the problems, you're right, with the whole structure of municipal government, because it was really to construct a community where business could operate, right?
Yeah. Well, so that's important to understand more broadly too. So who is being spotlighted and given platforms in a forum like the county commission meeting? It's your so-called small business owners, by and large. At the Roseburg City Council or other similar city councils, who is largely listened to or also shows up more often than not in droves to protect their interests? So-called small business owners. If you are watching television, whether it's a State of the Union address or something else that is said by any US federal president over many, many years, they always say that they are working for the benefit of the middle class, i.e., that small business owner class. That's also to say they are representatives of that class, of that mob of petty shopkeepers, of insurance brokers, what have you, who own their own businesses, small proprietors and such. At least that's who they are pandering to. They do not make appeals to or even pretend to represent. That's county commission, city council to federal government. They are not saying anything about renters, for one thing. People who work paycheck to paycheck or who live on the streets or in the parks, who are unemployed we're employed or not. If you are not a proprietor of any kind of standing, you're not considered at any level of government. So at the same time, it's to say that in that arena of the county commission, applies also to the city council, we have regimes locally that do not have any concern whatsoever for anyone who's, a tenant renting their home, your neighbor who is stocking shelves at the supermarket, your garbage workers who are picking up trash bins every morning somewhere in town. These are not the kinds of people who are ever going to be represented in politics as we know it. It's not going to happen. These are people who are without, to Betsy's point, without capital to speak of. There's nothing really to mobilize. They don't own anything but, their own ability to work. And
Well,
I think
and
that applies to the homelessness crisis as well, too. The problem of, say, city councilors like Shelley Loosley, who I've known for my entire life, talking about the homelessness crisis is, well, we've thought of everything that we could possibly do, and there's no solution. Well, there's no solution for these people because there is no ready way to profit the from transforming these people's lives in any way.
well, that might be a good segue into, a couple of nights ago, somebody was stabbed and killed down at Deer Creek Park. And so the person who did it was a 30-year-old man, and I'm not sure of his housing status, but the person who was down there. And a few months ago, there was a 16-year-old who stabbed someone elderly, right, and killed them. There was some kind of altercation. And the disturbing thing, and Kevin and I were talking about that, and we don't know all the details, but there were some videos going around and some allegations that the police were interfering with the emergency people, being able to go help the person. Because the person, was alive, I guess, when they took him away in the ambulance. If he had died there, they usually don't transport them to the hospitals. I'm aware of it. Um, and you see the people that were living outside trying to use, I think somebody told me it was a wheelchair to try to get them to the ambulance, actually, the person that passed away. So this, has raised this issue, very clearly about, and the role of, well, they say, well, the safety of the emergency responders, all well and good. And I understand that. And actually, even more so, having lived in an area that had ghettos and barrios, in the 80s, where the, safety concerns for emergency personnel where I lived was a real issue. But this kind of attitude that, lackadaisical attitude when there's people there and they're not really securing the scene for all the people who are homeless, right? If the person who stabbed him, because the person did leave the scene. So if there's all this, under the guise of safety, it's kind of like, in my mind, the same mentality that a officer, a couple months ago now pulled a gun on the spectators of them making an arrest when they had done a sweep. And the woman that where Max was, videotaping from his video, and the officer pulls a gun on him. It's kind of this mentality that is very pervasive. And I want to say one other thing that's probably a pet peeve of mine is the reflection of business and how they impact a city. and the nonsense shit that our city will waste discussing instead of solving homelessness is a damn parking in downtown Roseburg. Nobody here gives a shit about the customer parking in downtown Roseburg. I live here. What I care about is being able to park my car at my home because that's where I should have a right to park it. So, and business people here, we have spent like 3 iterations in probably 6 years with committees and staff time discussing what are we going to do about the parking downtown and all about the business people, really. And that's really who they consult. That's who they kind of pander to. And it's really, a bad reflection of what government is. Zach.
Well, on the police impeding on the saving of the life of the person who was stabbed. This is how the police typically operate. This is a situation in which they are operating, presumably for security reasons of one kind or another, where there's actually like no real legal situation that warrants that. They only exist there as an encumbrance upon the people who are dying. That's it. There's no clear legal situation for, that requires them to be barring the path for an ambulance, among many other things.
Well, even response. When we did naloxone training, right, for somebody who's ODing on opioids, is to not tell 911 that it's an opioid overdose, to actually not tell 911 because it could delay the response time for people to show up, right? And knowing that may be life-saving situation, the fact that they would have to warn people not to do that is pretty damn scary when we talk about public servants, that might jade their opinion of somebody who's worthy to be saved or not.
Yeah.
And as a first responder, I just have to say that, there is a lot of, when I first saw the video, all I can say is, it was, people will claim that that's procedure, that is, the by the books procedure. But, the way I was taught was that a person died that day. There's that the clear cut, there was a loss of life, which is a failure of procedure. You know what I mean? The operation was a failure. There's no other way to say that. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of things that we're dealing with here, is that it is life and death. That it's not sometimes as pronounced as some guy getting stabbed in the calf with a sword like the other night, but it is, starvation, it is malnutrition, it is heat exhaustion, it's all these other things that are killing people that our community standards aren't really talking about. You know what I mean? And it's, this is just an upfront example of, one of the ways that the community is not benefited by the authoritarian policing of the RPD, frankly. You know what I mean? There can be ways for beneficial help, but we aren't getting them. I mean, there's clear-cut cases of, profiling and all these other things going around. I mean, me and Betsy were going and doing an interview in front of Marcelli Park the other day. And who do we see but this community member come here, take pictures of us, wait around 20 minutes, tell us to move our cars around, and then head out. What do you think they were doing but trying to see what the heck was going on and profiling everybody there? Because we also had several unhoused members with us, getting their experiences and things like that. So it's just another example of, not necessarily cherry picking, but about really taking that aggressive stance where it doesn't need to be. Because again, you kept people from saving a life. You kept people from getting these resources. You kept, it's all just the same conundrum in different aspects. It's the loss of life. Zach, your hand's up first.
Yeah. Well, so you were talking about a kind of surveillance going on there, and that makes me want to bring the conversation a bit full circle here. Back to actually Abby Malik's statement at the county commission meeting the other day. So Abby Malik, who's representing this supposed coalition of citizens, is talking about crime being rampant in the county. Of course, not presenting anything to evidence that, the degree to which that's the case or what the crime
She said
is.
her husband was a cop of some kind. That's got to be proof
Whatever.
enough in her mind.
We love an anecdote. So I took note of something that she says explicitly. I'm going to quote her here. She said, quote, contrary to influencer or fake media information, law enforcement agencies investigate people who have or are breaking the law. So long as citizens are living and behaving in a way that falls within the law and order, there should be no issues, unquote. So if anybody paid attention to that, law enforcement agencies investigate people who have or are breaking the law. That's actually not true. But it's not true in a certain sense here. It's not true that police only investigate people who break the law. That's never been true. We would like to think it's true, in that we of course live by the myth of like due process and that the somebody is only guilty of a crime if they have been judged as such in a court of law, right? But police surveil people in one sense because they anticipate they will break the law. At least that's the claim that is usually made. And that's also to say that they operate on the grounds that one is fated, destined to break the law. But there's, of course, endless historical example of surveillance being used, being implemented to incite people to break the law, to agitate them one way or another to do so. And this extends to like the flock cameras that do exist in the city of Roseburg and other parts of Douglas County, that are a huge point of controversy across the country. They exist here. There's like very little contest over that. But those also exist as forms of surveillance, and they surveil everybody. Doesn't matter if you have committed a crime or not. That's not the point of it. Surveillance, but police surveillance of any kind starts from innocent people or people who have not even apparently committed crimes. There's only the assertion that one may be likely to commit a crime, or maybe they're connected to this or that network. But well, more cases than not, surveillance is just widespread and applied to anybody. Like anybody is potentially a criminal in the eyes of the police. Anybody. Well, except for I guess the people who pay them.
Well, even that
Administrators.
in the right circumstances. But the other thing is, that the reality is in this country, we have a history where surveillance, illegal police surveillance has happened against political activists. The most famous, if anybody knows history, is the McCarthy era, in modern times, and eventually the Senate snapped out of it and censured McCarthy, and, the red scare, red baiting continued, and people had lost their livelihoods and lots of things happened. And people need to really understand, making what we think and what we believe under the First Amendment, being able to say that, oh, we have the right to free speech except for this speech. And they've already done that already. They're doing that now. They just did it in Texas, right? There's a whole, the people were, somehow anti-terror, or terrorists, that they were involved in that demonstration where that killing happened in Texas, and even just the person who was the comic, wrote comics, was actually arrested and sentenced to prison. So that's already happening here. And because my family history actually lived through the McCarthy era because of my dad's affiliation with the Communist Party and a union organizer preceding my life. That all happened before I was around. But he was never in that kind of job again. That is what happened to him. And the reality is, it chased him out of the Communist Party. It didn't chase him out of politics. But the reality, it did substantially change his life and ostensibly my entire family's life. That is happening now. And you're right, absolutely, because of what we're talking about here and what we have been talking about, and saying words like communism, could make any of us a target under the current administration. I think we have to be cognizant of that. And, I've always said, well, I know they know where to get you, so I don't hide, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like we are living in surveillance systems with this.
Well, that's true,
But
voluntarily even, right?
Well, and it brought up a
well,
really interesting point that I brought up to Betsy earlier, which is, early back in my day when I was growing up, it's like, oh, don't move to Russia or North Korea. It's surveillance states, but we're living in one right now, currently.
I have a funny story. Actually really
Oh,
related
John,
to
did
that.
we ignore John? Did I ignore you, John? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, we have.
Sorry, John.
I kind of along the theme you've been talking about, when the subject of crime got brought up at the commission's meeting, and the cartels and everything, and they're talking about all this rampant crime in Douglas County. I couldn't help but thinking, if one reads what's led to the News Review and their police slaughter, crime in Roseburg and Douglas County consists of drinking an alcoholic beverage in public and illegal camping.
Unfortunately, you are right. You're right, John. I get the police logs. I listen to the scanners. You're absolutely right. Most of it is right with mentally ill people with mental health issues.
Right.
Yep, that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
We'll throw in the domestic violence shit. There is a lot of domestic violence calls in Douglas County.
So that doesn't sound like a cartel problem. That sounds like a system problem, right there.
Yeah.
What's a definitional problem? Because when you're talking about, say, camping in the parks, there was a point before, say, the city of Roseburg, before the ordinance was passed that effectively criminalized that. That is a changing of an action that already exists, the action of, say, camping in the park, into a crime that overnight shifts the crime rate.
Yeah, absolutely right.
That artificially creates, inflates that crime rate.
So does urinating in public when you don't provide people restrooms, right? When you provide people no place to go to the bathroom, and they go to the bathroom, and then you say it's a crime, because it can be a crime too, based on where you are. So yeah, it is. It's criminalization of acts of living, is which one of the homeless advocacy issues for all the time I've been in it, since the 1980s, has been trying to fight against. And we're on that swing back to the more draconian, and then we result in, you see this concentration camp in the park. By the way, the People's Homeless Commission, I did bring this up before, is supporting the efforts to get the two city parking lots that are on Southeast Stevens, to be used as an encampment, so people start, being able to move away from the encampment that is so large and hard to deal with. And so that's going to be on the agenda tomorrow night. There's also something that may interest people, and I will put it in the description of this video is also that there's analysis of the last quarter homeless activity report. So how many calls there were, and it's on the agenda. It's actually up on the city's website already is the agenda, but I'll put a link to that in the description. So if people are interested in both of those issues, but I, just peruse the one regarding the homeless report and the activity level, and I'll look at it more detailed later, but it's pretty interesting. And it really kind of, even that, doesn't reflect all of the data that and the money that is spent because of homelessness. There are salaries, let's say, of staffing that really isn't accounting for, right? It's not that functional accounting kind of method where you can target like who's working on this for this many hours, right? Or minutes. It's more a group. So there's actually a larger expense is what I'm saying when you look at it, because they don't calculate everybody's staff time into it. So, but those are the two things that are coming up regarding the homeless, and then the homeless commission meeting is meeting the Monday after that, and we're trying to arrange for the People's Homeless Commission to get a commitment from Dr. Dannenhofer for a night other than Monday on the time that we have it to have him come, and we'll meet at the point to have folks who are living outside come and join the conversation.
Mhm.
So anybody else have anything else? Are we done with this conversation or?
I have one more thing that I wanted to mention on the line that I provided from Abby Malik on law enforcement and surveillance. I find it very ironic that presently, as of this last week especially, the federal regime has been pumping out rhetoric about the dangers of communism, capital C communism, and of course, everyone always will refer to Stalinism, the dark period of the Russian 20th century. When it's funny to me because in Abby Malik's statement, when she's saying law enforcement agencies investigate people who have or are breaking the law, that's the quote. But we understand that that's not how surveillance works. That surveillance is anticipating people committing crimes. That's to say that surveillance is done on people who have perhaps not committed any crimes. That is a cornerstone of Stalinism. These mass surveillance of the public, no matter whether they've committed a crime or not. That appears in the flock cameras around town. That appears in the surveillance of homeless people by the police. That applies to any kind of surveillance you can imagine. That also is functioning actively here in Douglas County. That's what the county sheriff's doing. That's what the Roseburg Police Department's doing. That statement that's made by Abby Malik is asserting that surveillance is not anticipating crime, but that those who are being surveilled are criminals. Everybody is a criminal in that view. That is a Stalinist sentiment. If we want to make a real heavy historical comparison. That's the kind of shit that we're dealing with here. That's the kind of like historical negationism that we're dealing with at the county level of all things. This isn't even the Trump regime we're talking about. Same people who will say communism never works, communism is scary, Stalin is bad, are doing the exact same shit.
Well, and they get a part of the lexicon because you also hear often, well, if you weren't doing anything wrong, you wouldn't care if flock cameras, So this is a kind of mentality. Oh, well, if you even oppose surveillance, you must be doing something you don't want surveilled, right? You're guilty of something if you're now saying no. As a principle, I don't believe the population should be surveilled without cause, right? It violates due process, you know. Um, it then you become suspect as, oh, well, why wouldn't you want them spying on you? And so it's very dangerous. But it's often, you know, not surprising coming out of the police culture, right? You know, that's what they have to maintain, that us against them, right? No matter who them are, they have to always have that kind of
Yeah.
mentality going on to do what they do.
Yeah, Larry is making a point in the chat. Are private ring cameras part of the system? Yes, they are. They are. That is also a private company. That video footage that is captured from those is also sold to police forces. Yeah, that is a thing. And
You know,
a-
I
and
don't know
it,
any.
it's used also to triangulate people's movement as well, even in a single neighborhood. It's used to track down movement
Yeah,
of people who are being hunted down. And the flock cameras also do that as well. There have been arrests made of women who have gone to another state from, say, like Texas, have gone to another state seeking an abortion, medical abortion, and who have been arrested because they've been tracked through flock cameras on the freeways. That's a thing.
yeah. Oh, yeah, and absolutely. That's the thing when you listen to state police tracking, right? You know, that's what they know where somebody is. We see them now, and it's where there's a camera.
Yep.
Um,
But
and
it
yeah,
means it means that they're very fucking weak.
well, and you know, there's a lot of people out on the internet, you know, now that are former security specialists who are not only raising the real security problem with Flock, but even talk about the impact of your cell phone, right? That they can pick up data, not just of the driver of the car, but there's that technology that allows anybody who has a cell phone that's on in that car, they can access the data of your cell phone.
Hmm.
And so I don't think people really understand the extent of which this can be. And to trust the government, any government, I don't give a shit if it's Trump or who it is. You know, you should never trust the government to that extent to say, oh, well, we're not going to do it for bad reasons, right? You know, well, let's just make sure you don't, okay?
With that, I'll finish with the story that I wanted to tell very quickly since we're at the end of time. So when I was an undergraduate student, I studied abroad for a short time in Berlin, Germany, and I was staying in the middle of the city, in the former eastern portion of Germany, uh, uh, East Berlin. And I was out to a dinner one night with a bunch of my classmates, and this restaurant had these large like, communal tables. So there are a bunch of different parties of people who are all sitting around these same tables. And we had one seat open near the end of the table where I was sitting, and this elderly German man comes over and sits down next to us, and all of my my peers were freaked out. Oh, some strangers sat down with us, but I get to talking with him, and he was a physician who was nearing his retirement, and he told me that I had some basic conversation with him. He told me that he had grown up in East Germany during the years it was the GDR under the Eastern Bloc. So it was, you know, a so-called Soviet state, a vassal of the USSR. And I asked him, I said, oh, I've been under of the understanding that there was like mass surveillance in East Germany during this period. And I said, what was it like to live under such conditions? And he said, well, we all took it to be normal. Everybody went around about their lives as you know, as they still do. And he said, but you know, only one thing really changed. And he pointed behind me at the security camera that was hanging on the wall of the restaurant. He said, the people who are watching are what changed. You're still under surveillance. but the regime is different. But the conditions are effectively the same on that front. I still remember that to this day. Food for thought.
Yeah, that's what I agree with. It matters. It doesn't matter who's watching. Anybody else want to say anything before we go? Kevin?
Yeah,
John? Yeah.
it goes back to some words from a Jefferson Airplane song a long time ago. We are all outlaws in the eyes of America.
All right. Are we done?
And we are very proud of ourselves.